Good morning, class. It's another day at DM 330, and today we're going to be talking about characters and how to write good characters. I got most of the material from the Screenwriter's Bible, so you can just go through that when you're looking at how to write your characters because there's such good information there. I wish I would have had you guys read that before I did this class, but alas, you can read it later. Um, so we're going to talk about writing good characters, 10 keys to writing captivating characters. So the first thing you need for your character is a goal and an opposition. So we've talked about this over and over. They got to want something. There's got to be something they want to do. So happiness is not a goal. Sadness is not a goal. You know, seeking $10 million worth of doubloons off the Spanish shipwreck from the Florida Keys is a really good goal. Wanting to win a football game for the world champion because your little brother died and was the quarterback or whatever. Um, so those are goals that have something behind them. And a dramatic goal is specific and measurable. So it's got to be something you can see. It's something they can do. It can't be just in your mind or in their inner person or whatever, unless you're showing it outside. That's pretty obvious. So we've talked about that over and over, so I won't beat that to death. But number two is a goal must not be easy to obtain. There must be opposition to the goal, and really good opposition to the goal, because conflict makes drama, and so you have to ask, what does my character most want, and what do they fear? Because that fear will drive them into action and overcoming that action. Trying to think. Oh, and Liar Liar. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was Jim Carrey. He was a lawyer, and he had to tell the truth for a certain period of time, and it was really funny because he was a big liar. So, but his worst fear came true. He had to tell the truth, and so it can be really funny. But the opposition has to be either an individual or an organization that's represented by an individual. So we know, about the individual antagonists, but the government's against me, or the communist government is against me, or whatever, or the big multi-level corporation, evil multi-level corporation is against me. So it can be either individual or organization. But usually the organization has to be represented by an individual. There has to be a strong evil leader or a strong immoral leader of the organization that's willing to do the dirty deeds of the organization. So the opposition always has to be connected to an individual. So you gotta just remember that, because then you gotta make it easy for people to identify, antagonism with a person. So then personalize the opposition as it creates drama and the audience it causes sympathy with the protagonist. Um, you know, if you the greater the drama, the more it'll elicit sympathy. So your opposition doesn't have to be evil. You just need someone who has a good reason to block your hero's attempt to achieve his goal. So another thing we can have is non-human opposition. We all know that. It can be an alien. It could be a tiger or a lion. It could be some force of nature. We know that. So the opposition could be that too. So goals can change, and especially in character-driven stories. Sometimes in situations, the goals are very clear and they don't change through the whole thing. But in stories, they do. And one thing that happened in Up, the goal was, I don't know, most of you guys probably saw Up when you were kids. The goal is to reach Paradise Falls, but changes to save Kevin. So the goal beginning is not the same. So the goal at the beginning is not as interesting as the goal to reach Paradise, for the house to reach Paradise Falls is not as interesting as the goal to save someone's life. So that was That's the way you get, if you can add layers to the goals or add new goals that are related to the story or that fit well with the story, that's a good thing to do. Another thing is the unity of opposites. So you need to have a unity of the protagonist's goals or the need and the opposing character's goals. So what that means is that they have to go against each other in a way that makes sense, or a way where they're working together but in the opposites. So unity exists when the characters are in direct opposition to each other. Compromise impossible. So yeah, they have to be exact opposites and out of sync with each other. So that would be the unity of opposites. The second is you have to know your character's motivation. And I'm just breezing through this stuff quickly because we've talked about all this before. But it is interesting, for writing good characters, you have to think about all of this. So your character's desire must be motivated by showing need and belief and the belief causing it. We talked about that on Monday. It makes it personal for the audience and it causes them to build empathy. So you definitely have to show it. Like I said, I won't belabor that. We talked about that all day Monday. And then motivation grows with conflict, so it should be deepened by the midpoint of the second act. So you should see the limitations that are being put on the protagonist by the antagonist, and the conflicts should build so that by the midpoint, you can really see what's motivating them. If you don't know what their core belief is by the beginning, by the midpoint reversal, you really should know what their core belief. You really should be able to see what their core belief is and what their needs are. So it should be revealed. It can be revealed at the beginning through backstory, but it could be revealed all the way through it. But it should really heighten there in the middle of the second act. Just so you know. We're going to talk about backstory. The significant event that happens in the past of the protagonist that defines them. Now, sometimes the backstory can be an overall situation, and sometimes it's just one single representative event. In my little script that I showed you guys, the backstory that Greg, the artist, had was that his wife got killed in a parking garage. It was supposed to be a street scene, but it was raining that day, so we had to change it. But so she gets killed, and that's the single event that changes his life. So sometimes it can be a string of situations, or like a little kid goes through this while they're growing up, and so it's an overall situation. You can show that, but usually it's just one event, and it's easier if it's just one single event that provokes the movement. Some films don't need to use backstory device, so you don't have to worry about it. You can reveal backstory in different ways. You can reveal it in any point in the story too, in the beginning, middle, and it doesn't have to be right at the beginning. I mean, we've all seen enough films to know that. The backstory comes when something provokes his memory, and then all of a sudden there you see it in the middle of the second act. So it can be revealed at any point. It can be exposited through dialogue, or it can be shown played out. So there's a lot of ways to show it, and we'll talk about that in a second. Sometimes only the writer knows the backstory, but it can deepen the writing if you know the backstory. We're going to talk about how you do research on your character, and that you should research your character, and do a little treatment on it. But if you know the backstory as the writer, and even if you don't show a backstory scene or whatever, if you know, then you can give your character more the meaning. The dialogue's going to be better. It might refer to that, stuff like that. So the backstory, you need to show a flaw and a need. So it can be subtle. It could be not subtle, But in most romantic comedies and dramas, the protagonist was usually burned in a love relationship, and now they're afraid to be vulnerable, and they risk loving again. So it's those are kind of really lightweight backstories that you can show quickly. Everybody knows it. We've seen it a million times. We've lived through it a couple times. Those are the smaller. You can do little small backstories like that, or you can do the whole I was abused by my uncle and blah 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 backstory, or fired by the boss that was blah blah blah, in my dream job or whatever. So some of the ways that you can show backstory, you can use it by showing devices by flashback, and that seems to be what a lot of people use. But that's one of the best ways because it's all showing. Another way to do it is voiceover. You can voice over. They could be walking, through sitting on the train, and you've got voiceover. I mean, that's a kind of a boring. Voiceover can be overused for sure. But just as an example, she's sitting on the train and she gets the voiceover of the conversation that changed her life, and then we remember, and then maybe you use a little flashback in that scene, and blah blah. You see the guy and her and whatever. But yeah, but you can also use voiceover just in itself in a certain scene, laid over a certain scene to show the backstory. And then there's montage, where we know montage is just clips, put together to show a story quickly, and it can be just a picture, it could be short clips put together. So usually it's a lot of music laid over them, and so you're getting emotion. Now, if you watch Indian films, they do, when someone's in love, they always do a montage scene of her and him, and them dancing, and it's real, sappy music and love songs and blah blah blah. Almost every single time, if you watch Indian movies, that's how they do the backstory. That's how they show someone in love, and they use montage a lot. Not so much in American films, unless it's I don't know, dark comedy or drama. I mean, I'm thinking of Requiem for a Dream, but yeah, we don't use the montage a whole lot anymore. But flashback for sure. But like I said, if you watch anything from Bollywood, you're going to get montage, baby. Okay, so the fourth is you have to show the character's will to act. So actions speak louder than words, as we all know. And one thing I said in last class was, I've never seen a faithless act, Actions reveal character. And crisis reveals character's true colors. So people do what they do because of who they are. So what they believe is going to show through crisis, through constriction, through opposition. What's inside of them is going to come out. So you really want to show that. You really want to show that in the action. And say it's the character within that reveals how a screen person will act. Forget stereotypes, remember the Good Samaritan. Yeah, nobody expected a Samaritan to help a Jew, because all the Jews didn't help the good. If you guys know the story, none of the rabbis would help the guy that had been beaten by robbers, but the Jewish guy did. I mean, the Samaritan guy did, and Jesus showed that was the guy that did the good. That's what was inside of him. It doesn't matter where he's from. Samaritans were hated; they were feared by the Jews, but this guy was kind, and he showed his kindness by his actions. And so we saw a different person. We didn't see the stereotype. The stereotype was changed when we saw the person, the inside of the person, and what they do. There's a scene in Rocky where they're trying to show that he's really kind, even though he's a big, burly boxer. And it shows him like petting a kitten and giving a homeless guy something and to help him, and it shows that he cares about the guys in the neighborhood, and he's not just some meathead guy likes to beat people up or whatever. So you try to show things that reveal the person's inside. Show things on the outside that reveal the person's inside. Give time with give the audience just some secret time with the person where he's just alone, and you see him acting with somebody else in a way that's good or bad, depending on what you want to reveal about his character. But we need, you give him those windows through those little private moments. Your character will reveal more through action than dialogue. And like they say, show don't tell, because it works that way in real life. I mean, somebody can talk and be a complete liar, but you can see by their body language and what they do that they're actually somebody else. Like I rent a room to people. The girl who lives with me now is fine, but one of my roommates said, oh, I do this. I'm really good. I pay the rent on time, and I clean, and I'm a clean person, and blah blah blah. Well, what she said and which turned out what she was like were two totally different things. I mean, she was a slob. She didn't do her dishes for 4 days. She's, you know, just everything she said was not true. And even though maybe in her heart she thought she was that way, her actions didn't show that forth. So you can even show that. You can show somebody who thinks they're a certain way and then reveal in their actions that they're not that way, that they're a different way, and that's kind of fun. That makes for a fun character. Like I said, it works that way in real life. So dialogue can be you can show action through dialogue too, though. You can get exposition out through dialogue. You know, it's always less is more with that is the axiom or the thing. Point of view and attitudes. It says, what's your character's point of view about life? So you got to know what their attitudes are, where they start from. So what is their concept of love? What's their concept of God? What do they feel about simple things like doing housework and grocery shopping? Is happiness a warm puppy or a warm gun? I like that. I got that from the book. So, you got to know how they see life. Like the guy that happiness is a warm gun is somebody who's very suspicious about people. That's his concept of God and love and life. He's he's learned to just be defensive. And the one who says happiness is a warm puppy is somebody who lets people in, knows how to love, and feels secure. So you can show all that. Give each character a separate set of facts. Don't give them the same view of the story. So you have several different characters. You want them to act from a different point of view. You want their beliefs to be different and kind of either complement or oppose each other. Because then you set up a reality in your film. Because that's really how it is. I have an identical twin sister, and we believe the same about most things. I mean, we're both believers, Christians, but there's some ways that she doesn't. We don't believe the same. Our point of views are a little different, and even though we're identical twins. So your characters, everybody, comes to different conclusions. Every single individual human being comes to different conclusions about things, about life, and the more you can show that, the more interesting your film will be, and the more you can set up conflict or whatever, as if the characters are, different. And then you have to give your characters room to grow. And characters grow in stages, and we've been over and over this too. This is the character. This is the story structure. So the character begins with a certain point of view of himself and the world. I'm a winner, I'm a loser, the world's bad, the world's good, I'm afraid, whatever. Then a big event pulls him out of the water. Then he tries to swim. And then what's worked in the past is not working now, so he has to take a new and different action. He's a fish out of water, as they say. Then things get more difficult right up to the showdown. Oops. So yeah. Then he musters up the courage to take his final action, and then he emerges from the climax with a new self-concept. I'm no longer a fish, I'm a frog, or whatever. No longer a tadpole, I'm a frog. So the moment of realization usually comes right before the showdown or resolution. I don't know if we've talked about that much, but the self-realization, has to come either in the middle of the showdown or right before or right after, kind of right in that area where that final showdown is. That's when he gets his aha about who he really is or who he's become, whatever. So the key emotional moment for your audience is at that showdown and when he realizes, when he changes and realizes that he's changed or just has a different perspective. So we were talking about perspective and attitude. He'll get a different perspective, and that's when you know there's been change. Okay, believability. How do we make the audience care about our characters? That's the main thing. We have to give them human emotions. So you need to see your characters frustrated, hurt, scared, thrilled, in love, and we have to be able to relate how they're feeling. So the way you show it has to be real, has to be a way that the audience can see it you know, the devices you use, whatever, flashback, or how the dialogue goes, or whatever, the action, the audience has to be able to relate to it. They have to be able to empathize. So sometimes we empathize more with characters who fight what they really feel more than when they express it. So we've all seen those characters where they, you know, he's in love with the girl, but he can't, but he's fighting it because from she's from the good neighborhood and he's from the other side of the tracks, and so he fights with own his own emotions when he's around her, and blah blah blah. Not a very good example, but that is what it is. So you have to give them human traits. Does your character have a unique personality? Look for your character's strongest human traits. And so what you should do is pick three or four traits that your characters have. So you know, like there was an example here where Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, when the dwarfs were being developed, they were just seven old guys who looked alike and acted the same. Then Walt Disney decided to give each dwarf a human trait and to call him by that trait. And so then, you know, grumpy, sneezy, blah, blah, blah. And it made such a difference. So, you know, just different human traits. Just think of the four strongest ones, and then find a flaw that corresponds with the strongest traits, one of them or both of them, to add an inner conflict. And the flaw should be universal. It has to be something real, human flaw, you know, not, you know. But so yeah, so it's good if you think of your main character especially, but you got to think about that for all your characters really, but not just your protagonist, antagonist. But and also determine if your character projects a facade, because if they're phony, show it, you know, show it pretty clearly. Or if they don't know they're phony, you know, everybody else sees it or whatever. But yeah, if they project a facade, if it's not really who they are, then just you're going to reveal who they really are through action. So study personality types and profiles. Some people, you know, do the Myers-Briggs personality profile test. I'm an IMFP, you know, or some people use astrology. I wouldn't, you know, recommend that since we're Christians. But there's a lot of ways you can study personality profiles and types, and a lot of books on it, and you guys have probably been through a lot of them. So just do that, and sometimes you can write your character around the obsessive compulsive guy or the blah 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 blah, you know, whatever personality type, you know, psychosis or whatever. The personality type isn't really the psychosis, but it's more just you're generally who you really are. But that's a really good way to think of a character. Okay, my character is going to be INFP. You know, if you know the Myers-Briggs model. My character is going to be a choleric, or my character is going to be he's going to be an introverted blah blah blah. You know, it's really good to do that. So then, how do we make the audience care about our characters? Give them human values. Show the characters' values, what they believe. You know, truth. I believe in truth. I believe in justice, loyalty, family first. And actually, they were talking about The Godfather. You know, The Godfather, they were mobsters. I mean, they murdered people and they stole from people and stuff like that, but they didn't sell drugs. So all the other mobs were selling drugs, but they didn't sell drugs. So that put them like they were the bad guy protagonist that was just a little better than the other bad guys. You know, and they had all this loyalty and family first, and you know, justice thing. But you know, your bad guy protagonist has to be better than the other bad guys, and your good guy protagonist has to be better than all the other good guys. So there has to be something morally in their values that's, you know, just a slight standard above the fray. Then you give characters a moment alone to reveal their goodness, and I told you that about Rocky. Yeah, just give them a moment alone to reveal their goodness. If the central character is unsympathetic, he needs to be fascinating, and the opposing character needs to be someone that we like. So in the Dark Knight, the Dark Knight was awful, but he was fascinating. He was interesting. He was intelligent, and he could, you know, he was smart and could outsmart everybody and did things in a puzzle, that nobody, was a step ahead of everybody. But the opposing character, which was Batman, um, he needed he was somebody that we really liked. So the central character, like I said, the was not likable. But if you have an opposing character that we like, or someone else that maybe even the sidekick of the unsympathetic character, if we like him, that might help. So then we give them human dimension. Don't stereotype. Your character should have, be three-dimensional. Don't be afraid to give your favorite characters flaws. That's one thing that's warned about in a lot of screenwriting books is that people's favorite characters are really flat and lifeless because um, the writers don't want to give him any flaws. They want him to be just the good guy, But that's not real, and that's not how real life works. So characters without flaws are flat, lifeless, and basically boring. So show the flaws in all of your characters if you can. So show them in your cast of characters. You've got 5 characters. See if you can exploit the flaws in all of them. It's hard work, but you can do it. Just have to think of rounding out everybody. Heroes and villains. So they live somewhere between real life and cartoons. So, and depending on what you're writing, that's where where you have to be. But most villains, opposing characters, believe they are doing the right thing. And if they do, it makes the story more interesting. If they're blind, that their opposition is hurtful, or they think that they're doing the right thing, like the Apostle Paul killed the Christians because he really believed he was doing God's work by killing all the Christians in the first century church before he became a believer. So, he would be one of those villains that thought he was doing the right thing. So don't create arch villains or heroes because they're just too thin. They got to be round out. They've got to have flaws. They got to have good things. They got to have bad sides. A villain can't just have bad stuff, and a hero just can't have good stuff. Else it's just cheesy, in my opinion. So heroes are usually accidental and more interesting that way. Apart from the comic genre, obviously, the heroes are all hero, and no unless it's Marvel. But usually, and if you watch anime, they usually have more rounded out characters. They show more sides of the characters and stuff than I think the American ones do. About characterization tools. Characterization tools help us to define the character's personality. You need to know idiosyncrasies, habits, quirks, imperfections, and they can be shown through the physiology of the character, like if they're fat, if they're skinny, if they're tall and skinny, if they are whatever, if they have this imperfection on their face or they have that. So through what they look like and where the physiology is, you can show their imperfections and idiosyncrasies through props. Like there was a show called Columbo. I think it's still on reruns. But Columbo always had a raincoat on and a big cigar. He was a private investigator. So every time we saw Columbo, he had a cigar and that trench coat, and that was his like characterization. So you can use wardrobes, you can use props, dialogue. Sometimes they'll wear a certain thing like Columbo, or say a certain catchphrase repeatedly throughout the film that's characteristic of them, and you tend to either like it or not. But that's something you can do to make them quirky, and those kind of their things, certain idiosyncrasies about them stand out. So the next thing is research your characters. Research, research, research. As a writer, so that you know who they are, and they'll evolve on the page naturally if you do that. They'll become their own life on the page if you really research and know who they are. It'll just be internalized. And you can research by observing people and your own actions to things. So just watch people and watch yourself. Pay attention to yourself, and we've talked about that before. Investigate and explore your character's background, their ethnic, cultural, religious, education, family, etc. Get interviews with people and with your character's background. Do internet searches. Write a detailed character biography and profile. So what is their physiology? Are they fat, strong, short, unhealthy, healthy? They have cancer, what's their physiology? What's their psychology? What are their emotions? What's their disposition? Are they grumpy all the time? Are they sad? How do they handle relationships? Are they angry all the time in relationships? Introverted or extroverted? Aggressive or passive? You know, just explore all this about your characters before you even start writing them. The better you know your character, the easier it's going to be for you to write them, and the more natural they're gonna emerge on the page. What are your phobias and your secrets? What are their attitudes, addictions, prejudices, frustrations, habits, superstitions, morals? Be thorough, you won't regret it. So then you need a strong supporting cast. That's the last thing. Well-written stories are about relationships, where well-written stories, relationships are emphasized. All of your characters need to work in symphony. They need contrast between characters that create the right tension for your story. So when I say in sympathy, it's just like a symphony, different instruments playing together the same song. So in large casts, you need one protagonist and an antagonist. And what's recommended in the Screenwriter's Bible is a sidekick, which I thought was interesting. I haven't heard that before. A sidekick can lend contrast to your central character and help reveal the protagonist through feelings and intentions. So you may want a love interest that plays two roles in a protagonist's life, like it's her boss and he's in love with her, or he's the neighbor that is part of the whatever the group that you're in, and he's your coach on your tennis team or whatever. Anyway, so love interest that has a different kind of role. It's not just a love interest that makes it more interesting, that they already have a role in your life and then they're a love interest. And a betrayer can add a twist to the story also, your protagonist Judas. And one thing that's really important is that your supporting characters need to have goals and not just be there as furniture. So you need to think through your characters and round them out too. So that's about it for that. So if you do a lot of research, if you work on this stuff, you're going to be able to have really strong characters and really be able to work with them. So we will get to questions and the other part of the class.